So I'd just like to begin by saying a big thank you to Matt, who's been hosting me for the last month at the Caroline Simpson Research and Collections Library. And I've been working on the Stuart Simons collection. Stuart Simons is an avid collector of 19th century pianos, which he recently donated 130 pianos to WAPA in Perth, and he also donated his sheet music collection to the Caroline Simpson Library, which is what I've been working on. So this is what I have found so far. So to begin this paper, I would like to refer to this quote written by Malcolm Prentice in his 1983 book, The Scots in Australia. It notes the importance of several Scottish figures and their economic and cultural impact on art, philosophy, literature, and the sciences. But there's one notable absence. Where is the Scottish contribution to music? I'm sure if I were to ask all of you what comes to mind when I say Scotland, most of you might say the bagpipes, the fiddle, Scots wahey, and let's not forget a song known throughout the world, Should Old Acquaintance Be Forgot. Perhaps the reason for the absence of music in a study about Scots in Australia is that the Scots did not continue to maintain their traditions after immigration. Though Cliff Cummings in his 1993 article challenged this suggestion, stating that the Scots deliberately sought to maintain their identity, asserting their national distinctiveness. While some studies, such as Rosemary Richards' in-depth and detailed work into Georgiana McRae, a Scottish woman who arrived in Australia with her family in 1841, is a clear example of a family placing enough value on their Scottish musical identity to bring it with them across the oceans, there is still much more work to be done to better understand how many other families brought their Scottish music collections with them, what's inside the collections, and if they continue to collect Scottish music after immigration, perhaps by way of solidifying their national identity despite their displacement. The Stuart Simons sheet music collection, to which I've been working on for the past month, is adding to the narrative about Scottish music tradition in colonial Australia. 5 volumes in particular have a Scottish focus, but they are also an example of the personalised nature of sheet music collecting, which I'll be discussing in more detail throughout this presentation. I've only been working with the collection for the past month, so I'll be presenting my preliminary findings on 3 volumes in particular. So this small manuscript volume is a rare example of a personal handwritten collection. The embossed plate on the front reads 3 collections of airs, or songs, arranged for the pianoforte, JHL 1807. The title, 3 Collections of Airs, suggests that it would have been transcribed, that what has been transcribed is 3 specific collections, which led me to assume that the tunes would belong to 3 separate books. Indeed, the first 9 tunes do come from Malcolm MacDonald's A Collection of Strathspeys and Reels, published in 1788, which is obvious if we look to the bass line. It's a direct copy of the same bass line appearing in MacDonald's tune book. Typically, bass lines would not be included in handwritten transcriptions, and though bass lines have been included in these first pages, throughout the JHL volume, they begin to disappear, perhaps due to space, or the transcriber did not feel it was necessary to note all the parts. However, some of the melody rhythms have been changed in the handwritten transcription to include Scotch snaps. The reason for the rhythmic changes could be the scribe's attempt to show how the tune was typically performed, whereas the print is assuming performance practice knowledge, where the player would read the straight rhythm but then play the snap. While 1 book has been identified and 3 of the other tunes can be found in the 3rd collection of Neil Gow's Reels, printed in 1792, the combination of Scottish and French dance tunes, theatre songs, Scottish songs, and Haydn sonatas suggests that the manuscript has been copied from many more publications. The music within this volume is some of the earliest examples to be found in the Stuart Simons collection, with the majority of pieces dating from the late 18th century and a few from the early 19th century, which matches with the date on the front plate. It all appears to be written in the same hand throughout the volume. However, at this stage, I've been unable to identify who JHL is. More work will need to be carried out to identify the name of the original owner and to classify the tune books from which a number of the tunes have been taken. The note on the front of this volume reads Haydee B. Harris from her affectionate mama, April 8th, 1864, demonstrating that it was clearly a gift to Haydee Beatrice Harris, who was born in 1848 and died in 1934, from her mother, Mary Ann Thew. Haydee was the younger sister of mezzo-soprano Flora Harris Sheridan Moore, who worked both as a performer and teacher in Sydney. Unlike her sister, Haydee would never emerge as a professional singer, though she did perform in at least one public concert as an amateur vocalist, as is evident from a newspaper review written in 1865. So unfortunately, the duet that's mentioned in this quote is not included in this volume of music. And that's not to say that she didn't have another volume of music that we haven't been able to find or don't have anymore. There's a number of songs in this volume that I have been looking at, though, that are for a soloist. The vast majority of the volume contains Edinburgh publications, and 9 out of the 32 items do not appear in digitised catalogues. Several of the Edinburgh publications are printed by John Watling, who was once an apprentice of the impresario Domenico Corri. Though Watling was a publisher and composer for the majority of his life, much of his music does not often turn up in collections, despite him reprinting popular songs during the period. For example, he's included an edition of If a Body, Meet a Body, better known as Burns's Coming Through the Rye. However, Watling states that his edition has not been Italianised in the least, which is perhaps a bitter stab that he did not care for James Johnson's inclusion of appoggiatura in the original. Watling has also changed some of the words, including gin to ith and gangin and comin to gangin, perhaps by way of putting his own stamp on the song. There's a number of popular Scottish songs in this volume, including Wally Wally, as well as Burns's songs, but there are also a couple of printed Gaelic songs, which are rare to see in collected volumes. One such song is entitled Morag, and there's only one other edition, which is on microfilm at the British Library. However, the microfilm edition is not by Watling. It was published by Muir and Company in 1800. Taking into account all of the other printed music by Watling which appears in the Haydee B. Harris volume, it all dates from the 1790s, and it's possible that the Watling print is earlier than the Muir. The song itself is that of a typical pastoral love song, where a young man lusts after a beautiful woman, Morag, who has a good head of hair and apparently a very nice sense of fashion. The binding also seems to suggest that the volume was in use for many years after it was bound, but the music inside would have been almost 60 years old by the time it was gifted to Haydee. It's possible that this was a family heirloom to remind her of her Scottish heritage, though further work will need to be done to track the movements of her family prior to her arrival in New South Wales, and if Haydee continued to sing as an amateur, performing any of the songs from this volume in public or in a more domestic public setting. The Lucy Havens volume has provided much scope for research, since a lot of the information can be found out about her life and family both in Britain and after her immigration to New South Wales. Her father, Robert Havens, who was born in 1771 and died in 1818, was a doctor from Colchester, while her mother, Janet Crabb, was born in Monimail, Fife. Her mother is listed as a subscriber to William Brown's collection of waltzes, which can be found in this volume, and strongly poses a passionate musical interest within the family. Lucy was the third of 5 children to be born in Monimail, Fife in Scotland, and the family seemed to have been resident there for a number of years before moving to Whitehaven in Cumberland in the north of England. This is the final resting place of Robert Havens Sr. Inscribed in the front of the music collection is Lucy Havens, Whitehaven, Cumberland, which is clear evidence that she collected and bound her volume while resident in Britain. The collection is an equal balance of Scottish, including publications from Glasgow, Edinburgh and Aberdeen, and London publications, which perhaps suggests that Lucy started collecting while resident in Scotland, but also travelled to London to purchase music. It's possible that the music was bound in Whitehaven, and while this first page, which is stuck to the cover, preserves the provenance and gives us vital information that's necessary for research, unfortunately the whole volume was rebound in the early 21st century. And this means that the binding reveals no information about whether the collection continued to be used after it was bound, but presumably the reason for rebinding was because of damage to the original. The dates of the publications range from 1800 to 1830, with many being published between 1810 and 1820. This provides further evidence that the volume was collected and bound prior to Lucy's departure from Britain in 1839. The Havens family, including Robert Havens Jr. and his wife, Lucy's two unmarried sisters, Janet and Jane, and her married sister, Eliza Campbell, and her husband, emigrated to Australia, arriving in Sydney on the Orient in 1839. Lucy married a former convict and successful businessman, Thomas Hines, in 1850, and upon his death in 1855, Lucy inherited several properties, including Cheshunt House on Cumberland Place, which is no longer standing, and 4 terrace houses in Bathurst Street, which Lucy rented to tenants. She then remarried the Scottish Presbyterian minister, Reverend William Purves, who was the chair of the committee that led to the foundation of St Andrew's College in Newtown, Sydney. After her second marriage, Lucy's activities become a little more difficult to track, and there's little information as to whether she continued to have an interest in music after her emigration. However, the Havens are an example of a well-off, middle-class family who came to Australia. This collection makes an otherwise invisible woman who is not frequently discussed, despite the success of her 2 husbands, discernible. And my research into her inheritance suggests that she was influential in her own right as a businesswoman in Sydney. Further work will need to be carried out to determine the reasons the Havens decided to emigrate, and if Lucy continued any musical activities after her immigration and marriages. I'll be also continuing to search for information about her mother, Janet, and whether she subscribed to any other pieces of music while resident in Britain, or indeed in New South Wales. These collections are not exclusively Scottish, but the Havens and the Harris connection to Scotland are prominent, and they add to a growing picture about the musical scene that was happening in a domestic setting in New South Wales. And there's still much more work to be done with both the Stuart Simons collections and others that may be in private hands, that may not have been catalogued yet, or that are sitting in libraries that are still to be uncovered. These collections provide a wealth of information about each individual, but also about fashion, culture, and personal value. Let's not forget that these colonial homes were once vibrant hubs of all kinds of music making, to which Scottish music heavily features. Thank you very much.